First of all, thank you very much for having me, and in particular in person. I have to say I get so much energy from actually seeing so many of you and having the opportunity to be not only in this amazing place, but be with you all here today. I'd like to spend a bit of time on the protection gap. And it's actually a topic that I think to many of us is very close, right? For many of us, the reason why we actually are in insurance is because we're really looking for that purpose to really make sure that people can live their lives and we protect society and we help corporations to really flourish and do their job and also be able to grow while having insurance. Now, one of the things that is interesting when you look at the press and you actually search globally for protection and protection gap, you actually see that many names come up. Cyber, climate change, green transition, you see quite a bit. And you see, interestingly, insurance of what we actually think we're there to cover, right? We're there to cover the protection gap, hardly surfaces. And I think that gives you quite a bit of a hint, I always feel, on, and also a bit on self-reflection. Are we actually doing a good enough job as insurers to really making sure that our customers understand what are we here for? Actually protecting people's lives. Now, I'd like to share a bit of data on actually what does that protection gap mean, and I'd like to hone in on two metrics that we're gonna discuss. The first one is the protection gap in itself. So what is actually the annual insurance premium in addition to what exists today that would need to be there to cover those additional risks, both by line of business and in addition to actually what there is today. The second one is the resilience index. And when I'll speak about the resilience index, it's really looking at what is the insurance protection today, what is out there that we as insurers are offering, and how much is there of a gap, because they're not yet products that exist, or individuals just don't really know how to get the coverage. So I'll spend a bit of time to speak about these two metrics. Now, let's step back and let's look at the world for a minute. And these are crazy numbers, right? We cannot even imagine what is a trillion, yeah? But when you look at work we've actually been doing with Swiss Re, and I know many of you have been looking at this at the organizations, what is striking is the absolute size of that protection gap. It's 1.5 trillion US dollars globally. Now, when you think of that, and I'll go into how actually that is composed of, that is actually a side of what is even a bigger gap that we have, which is the pension gap globally. So when you look at the pension gap and you look at present value, that actually would be 41 trillion US dollars globally. That would be in annual terms, that's close to 2 trillion US dollars. So that's in addition to the protection gap that I will be speaking now about that we see globally. Now, if we go back to that protection gap, 60% of that actually is a gap that exists in emerging markets across the world. So there is really that question, and I think, you saw in my introduction, I'm Swiss, so it's fair to say I spent a lot of time with one of the reinsurers there, and really the question is, if we want to make the world more resilient, what can we do to really close that gap? The thing that is alarming, as we look into the individual lines of business, that gap is actually increasing rather than shrinking. So if we step back, I know many of us are thinking of insurance being, at one point a market in many places around the world, in particular in Switzerland and places where I come from globally, it's a rather flat market. But when you look at this huge gap, there's a huge opportunity for us as insurance industry actually to be there to protect that gap. Now, I want to spend a bit of time across the individual sectors. So let's start with the two that are probably closest when we think about protection, which is the life insurance protection gap and the health protection gap. You see, when you look on the bubbles above, that's the resilience factor, so that you see on life, 46% are actually, we have products out there, and even more so on the health insurance side. Actually, COVID has shown that governments do actually step in sometimes to provide that protection and actually make sure that everybody has access to health insurance. So there are products out there. Now, we actually do see, while that gap is increasing, and again, it's mostly in emerging markets, there's opportunities that we actually can grasp as insurers. I just want to mention a few. First of all, when we do research, we see that the understanding of what is it actually insurers offer is still not truly understood, or it is understood far too late when actually individuals cannot afford the premium anymore. So there is a big piece around getting and segmenting the younger population. It's about education, and then it's also about rethinking the way that we actually can offer products. It's fair to say, and I think if you look in your own shop, have you really innovated the life and health insurance policies? And when you look at it, in many instances, it's pretty much the same that we have offered for the last 80 years. But we do see, in particular in some of the emerging markets, some new trends, microinsurance offers that are out there. And I think if we manage as a sector to make sure that those life and health insurance policies are distributed in a way cheaper way than they're distributed today, I think there is really an opportunity for all of us jointly to close that gap. Now, I want to go to two that also were on that first panel that I've shown that are heavily, and probably more so, debated all over. And I'd be very curious if I look into the room on whether you're actually insuring those at this point in time. When we look at overall the protection gap, a big issue is the entire climate challenges that we're facing, the natural catastrophes that we're facing. And when you look at the gap that we have out there, so first of all, only 25% of all the risks are being insured today. Only 25%. And we all know that actually these risks are not only increasing by severity, but also by frequency. So that's a huge challenge, but also an opportunity to think about, and I know sometimes you may not be able to cover it just yourself, but how to team up here all together to actually make sure that, as an insurance community, jointly, we can actually close part of that gap. At least if we could close another 25%, we would have already done a great service for many people out there. There's also an opportunity as insurers to be an active driving force in the change to achieving the net zero targets. And I know this is in particular a hard time now where we're all facing the challenges. And by the way, I just want to say, being here in Poland, I just cannot say enough how much we are in awe and in all respect on how you as Polish people are supporting the Ukrainian friends. I just wanted to say a big applause. We're so in awe on how you're doing that. And at the same time, I think, and I know in the session before there was a heavy debate, can we let go on some of these challenges? I actually think we as insurers, we have a unique opportunity to be there side by side in supporting not only society but corporations on how to achieve their net zero goals. It's not an option to just walk away and say, we're not going to insure gas pipelines anymore. We're not going to insure that anymore. We're not going to, because I think as insurers, we have an opportunity aside from the way where we put our capital on the asset management side to actually shape the dialogue, to be a partner in supporting those that really work hard in the transition to become net zero. So that's, I think, if I have a wish, I think there's a big opportunity in actually being a partner in providing services. Last week, I actually was in the US with one insurer that some of you may know, FM Global, that's really specialized in large risks. And they are retraining their over 2,000 risk engineers on helping corporates to really understand how they can change, what they can do in their entire supply chain to really help them to achieve their net zero targets. Now, aside from climate, I also want to go on one that in particular is relevant for corporates, which is cyber. Now, I'm curious, who of you in this room actually believes that we have enough data to date to ensure cyber risk? Oh, wow, nobody? Oh, wow. So let me ask another question. Who in this room is actually insuring cyber risks? Oh, wow. I'm not sure whether the Polish translation doesn't work, or whether you're preparing already for the party later on. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. Yeah. So cyber heavily debated now, as we're looking at the risk, right? And I know when I have debates with one of the reinsurers in Switzerland, they always say there is 3 things that you need to know to really insure a risk. It's the frequency, it's the severity, and it's the trend. And we don't really understand well any of those 3. Yeah? And I therefore see the hesitation, right? Nobody would dare to raise the hand. Now, when you look at it, this is a massive problem for corporates. And by the way, not only for large corporates, but in particular also for small corporates, SMEs. And only 10% of those risks are currently covered. In a study, when we looked at mid-sized corporates, any particular breach actually costs an average corporate $2.4 million. That can mean that this can put companies into bankruptcy. Yeah? And not only at a small size. Then every 11 seconds we have somewhere an attack happening, if not actually a lot more. And I think what is something that companies realize, that more than 80% actually feel they don't have the right cover in place. Now, while we're working as an insurance industry to understand how we can insure it, I think helping corporates, whether small or large, in actually helping them understand how they can mitigate the risks, what they can do, is essential. And next to that, services that we can provide, I think there's also an opportunity, again, to partner and position yourselves, and where you don't really have the risk appetite, work with those that can help you reinsure some of those risks. Now, I want to close here and just leave you with a few thoughts. First of all, I think there is a huge gap, and unfortunately, the gap will be widening in the way we as insurance industry can protect individuals and corporates. I think there's an opportunity we have, and that opportunity is now, because now it's really tough to do it, to really influence and be a partner to corporates to really, transition the economy towards the net zero targets. I think it's maybe also at a time in 150, 200 years of history of insurance to think about how we can actually innovate and how can we produce not only more modular products, but maybe also some innovative services that support that. And I think last, we all have also a job to do, I think collectively, in helping ensure that people really understand that we as an insurance industry want to be there to support them, and how we actually can offer fair protection. And last but not least, and I heard already there was quite a bit of debate early on in this session between the regulator and the association. I think that debate is a good debate to have, because in the end, we need all jointly to shape a regulation that actually allows us to close that protection gap. Thank you very much, and with that, I'm looking forward to the panel discussion.